welcome to WNHH Radio's Dateline New Haven. I'm your host, Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make New Haven tick. It's Mayor Monday on Thursday, everybody. Mayor Toni Hart makes New Haven tick. She's here in the WNHH studio for her weekly Mayor Monday checkup on what she and we are up to in the Elm City, but we're doing it on a Thursday. We're doing that for a couple of months because of crazy deadlines, schedules with Jewish holidays, other holidays, but she's still coming in to make sure you get to hear from her. Welcome, Mayor Hart.
Thank you very much.
Thanks
Good
for coming
morning.
in. Good morning.
Great to be here.
If you have a question for the mayor, pop it to us via Facebook Live on the New Haven Independent Facebook page. You'll see the video there. You can see what we look like. And thanks to Gateway Community College and Bertram Moses PC for providing financial support for today's program. So, Mayor Harp, I don't think you were fasting yesterday in Yom Kippur, but you did have what I would consider a very interesting Yom Kippur experience.
And what was that?
I love when you don't know what I'm talking to and you have that caution in your voice. What was that? Like getting ready, what I'm getting hit with. Well, I was reading about and hearing about you because my reporter Tom Breen was there too. The night before Rosh Hashanah at a Jewish society in Orange Street, Shabtai House, you were an invited guest, along with Scott Lewis, who spent 18 years in jail for a murder he did not commit. And you were there meeting this really interesting guy. Is he from Cleveland? I forget.
He's from Detroit originally, and then he's moved to Cleveland and has a restaurant there.
So there's a new movie about this guy, documentary. They showed it, and then he and you all talked about it. And it was about giving second chance to people coming out of prison and having them work at this restaurant as a way to rebuilding their lives, and how it's had a lot of success. And part of that, I wasn't there, but part of that, it was tied into the whole whole Yom Kippur thing of repentance.
Right.
And Rabbi Jim Ponette talked about how we're all complicit in the criminal and justice system. People like Scott Lewis and the people hired at this place, losing huge chunks of their lives because of what the system did wrong to them. And I know you felt pretty strongly about that. So what was that like for you? What did you experience?
Well, I thought it was a very moving experience. And it really shows you, I mean, there were so many people in the movie that, including Brandon Krostowski himself, who had brushes with the law, oftentimes in some of their cases had been incarcerated for many years, and they were released, and they really needed to get help in finding something positive and productive to do with their lives. And so the interesting thing about Brandon was that he had a brush with the law, and then a French chef took him in, and he learned those skills, and he traveled to France, and he worked all across the country in these French restaurants, and he got the idea that those skills were sort of fundamental skills that if you have French cooking skills, that they're fundamental skills that you can take with you to almost any restaurant, and they can be skills that can help recreate your life.
So what did he do? What's this Edwin's program?
Okay, so his middle name was Edwins, but but that's not what Edwins means.
It's probably an acronym.
It is. It's Education Wins, which I really resonate with that. And so the kind of education that he gives, he identified about 80 people who were returning from the criminal justice system, and he trained them in French cooking. And the first cohort, they had to learn within 6 weeks, I believe it was, before they opened this restaurant called Edwin's. And so everyone who works in that restaurant is someone who has been in the correction system in Ohio.
And it's successful, right?
It's a very successful restaurant. It's a successful training program. They have a French chef that teaches everyone all of the skills, and it's called Knife Skills. So,
I like that, and that's the name of the documentary.
Yeah, and I didn't know that there were different kinds of, I've been cooking all my life, and I didn't know there were different kinds of cuts that you give different types of vegetables.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah, well, you kind of could see some of that in the documentary. And so
it's like an eggplant, you cut one way, and a pepper, you do another.
And another way, and that, I knew that there were jillion vegetables.
Oh, like carrots, right? And those like little sticks.
Yeah, right. But I didn't know that there was a special way that you cut the vegetable in order to get it to look like that. And so they were trained in all of those things. They were trained to make different kinds of sauces. I think there were like 5 or 6 different kinds of sauces that once you learn how to make each one of those sauces, they're the basis for almost any dish that you could make in any kind of cuisine. And so the fact that these people learned how to do that, and then they learned to cook and to do the various stations in the kitchen, but they also learned how to wait tables, how to handle the front door, and become the maitre d', and they did all of that. He was very honest about saying that oftentimes they lose 50% of the people because for one reason or another it's really difficult for them to adhere, but they can always come back because so many of them are afflicted with drug substance use, let's put it that way. And so he works with people. They can come back to another cohort if they've, for one reason or another, couldn't complete the one that they were in. But they follow different people in the movie, and it was just interesting to hear their story, to hear their journey. Some of whom made it, some of whom did not, and it's nominated for an Academy Award.
So it's interesting to me that you actually spent a whole night there, not just watching the movie, but from what Tom Breen wrote, and you can read about in The Independent, pretty interesting discussion afterwards. You had 2 people here, including Scott Lewis, another man who'd been wrongly jailed, and people were talking about the issues and what to do. And I guess there's been some discussion since about bringing that program here. Scott Lewis wants to bring it. What did you hear about that?
No, sure. Scott Lewis thought that it would be a really a great program to bring here. While we were discussing it, Brandon said that while he doesn't want to start any programs outside of Ohio, he would be a consultant to programs if it was something that we
got a swanky Is it still a French restaurant, that one that used to be Roger Sherman's? What's it, Union League?
Union League, yeah.
That's pretty good, right?
It's an excellent restaurant.
Yeah.
And it would be nice if people could learn those skills. And so given that restaurant, the whole restaurant business sector is a booming sector in our city, that it might be reasonable to train people in those skills. And I know at Concat they're doing some of that. I was going to say that there
is a program with that.
And but there could be more that really hone in on and specifically address our returning citizens.
And then you've had administration have had an idea for the Armory. I know there are a lot of other issues with the Armory, difficulty of getting it up to speed, of having a kitchen where people start businesses sharing the commercial kitchen.
So I was speaking to Dr. Moulay because our food assistance work comes under him, and so
Dr.
Takibu Moulay from the Community Services Administration.
Oh, you're new top human resources guy. I'm sorry, I forgot his name.
So they're working on looking at how we can, with City Seed, how we can develop that. I don't know if it'll be at the Armory or somewhere else.
And City Seed is the nonprofit that does those farmer markets.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And you're hearing of all that on Mayor Monday. Mayor Tony Harps in the house on WNHH 103.5 FM. Tom joined. Thanks for listening in. You were in D.C. I hadn't read anything about it, but weren't you for Mayor Muriel Bowser?
I didn't go because of Hurricane Florence.
Oh, they had it. That's right down there. It really hit them. Now we kind of passed that one.
Yeah, I think it was Tuesday. We had a little bit of rain, but it really didn't affect us much at all.
Yeah, I was kind of glad we dodged that one. I think Hampton got it, didn't they?
Did they get more than we did?
Yeah, I think there's some kind of special dot on all these secret weather maps that when anything's blowing through, it hits Hampton a lot harder.
They've got their hand up and said, "Come on over here."
Don't forget us. Yeah. Haji Bey Chadabosulu says, "Good morning, Paul and Mayor Harp. I hope the sun brightens up your day the same way your smile brightens up the city's." Hey, thanks a lot, Haji. Very nice thing to say.
Really kind. Yeah.
Okay, you've been up to some wordplay. Oh, yeah, you're supposed to say now. What are you talking about now?
Yeah, no, what is that?
What is that all about, Paul? Okay.
Wordplay?
Yeah, you've been making puns this week.
Oh, I have.
Yes, you have been. You've been caught in the act. You were at a ribbon cutting for the new boathouse.
Uh-huh.
And you called it a watershed moment. So it's been years in the making. A lot of money. We created the boathouse. I got to admit, I think it's a great thing. I never got the whole historic part because they tore down something that people thought was kind of special, the Yale Boathouse to Y-90 5. They put a new one by the water, which I'm really glad we got, and they made a historic replica. But what it's really about is people using the water, right? It's going to be.
It really is, and about particularly young people in New Haven having an opportunity to learn water skills from canoeing, kayaking. They can learn to, I think on Saturday, actually, everybody can go down and experience the dragon boat and go out there and row.
I love the dragon boat thing. That's a new tradition
Yeah.
that we have these races with the big dragon boats every,
Right.
what is it, every spring, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Or not July? June.
In
okay.
June. Yeah, it's still spring.
Depends what in June. Yeah. So tell me about the boathouse. First, let's take a sip of your tea. Tell me about the boathouse event. What was that like?
Oh, it was so much fun. There were, I think, about 150 people there. And we really got an opportunity to celebrate this collaboration that was 20 years in the making. And the building itself, it took about 4 years to actually build.
Yeah, why was that?
It was because it was built on a platform. And then I think Rosa spoke to this every now
Rosa
and then.
DeLauro, yeah.
Yeah, every now and then the feds in the state would take the money back and she would have to give it.
That's funny. That's really part of what a congressperson does,
Yeah, so there were several times that she had to rescue.
And did they have to deal with climate change at all? Because I know we want to build up the waterfront, which makes a lot of sense, and that we have to keep in mind rising water levels.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the design features for the first floor where they're going to be keeping the various boats is that if we have a high tide, an extraordinarily high tide, the walls collapse.
Oh.
And the water can come into the building and come out.
How interesting.
Isn't it? Yeah, it's really kind of a cool design.
And now this sounds ridiculous, but I wonder whether then rescue people can hop in boats right there if streets are flooded. I just have North Carolina in my mind.
I'm sure they could. Absolutely.
Or is it South Carolina?
Both of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, you see all those pictures of boats, people in boats going on main streets downtown.
Yeah.
And I just always think how lucky we are.
Oh, man, what a blessing. Nothing like that has happened to us.
And another blessing is to hear from Bob, who, even though it's not Monday,
mm-hmm.
he's on top of it that we're on the air today.
Well, he is really. That's amazing. Bob is incredible.
Bob, thanks for calling Mayor Monday on Thursday.
Hey, Bob.
Hey, yeah, prayers for those people in the Carolinas.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Down there, incredible. But my question today concerns the school board, Mayor. I'm sorry, I'm just tuning in, and I don't know if you've talked about it.
We have not.
But about this ethics probe of two of its members and hiring a lawyer, and what is this costing now the city taxpayers?
Well, that is a recommendation of one person on the school board. And it's not anything that the school board has taken up. And so to say that we're going to spend money to do that, what I've suggested to the superintendent is that we have an ethics commission, and these are volunteers, most of whom are.
Ooh, that's a good idea.
And so if she believes and the board believes that this matter ought to be investigated, then I think before going to hire a lawyer, we should we should transfer the matter to the ethics commission.
Hey, Bob, I want to ask you a question because you come from a newspaper family, even though you're not a journalist, and Mayor Harp as well. So I had a problem with this. This was an anonymous email, obviously from someone within the Board of Ed who has obviously an axe to grind against two members. Doesn't mean that something there isn't true. But someone writes an anonymous email, and I'm all for getting those because I love getting the tips. I hear nasty things about people all day. Doesn't mean you then write an article about that saying someone in an anonymous email said something nasty about someone. They didn't say they killed somebody. They didn't say stole money. They said the kind of thing about potential favoritism with their kids in school that you hear about everybody on every side. If somebody doesn't like two people on the board, they find a way to anonymously get that there.
Yeah.
And then it might be true. And then somebody else then on the other side will point out something that somebody got favoritism for who was sending out that information. And I'm saying at some point you have to look at it, but I don't understand how immediately, because we wouldn't write a story saying an anonymous email said somebody's kid got into a school.
But why did some of the other news outlets do it? And not only that, one of the things that troubled the parent was that They identified by name her children.
Well, I talked to the parent about that, and I thought that if you're in public life, I don't know, you don't need to identify the name, you don't put their picture. If it turned out there needs to be a story where you look at everybody who gets into school a certain way, or everybody whose kid works for the school board, if you really want to look into that and go in depth, that's okay. We were more interested in the FOI clinic they had. But, everybody has a different priority. That's okay.
Right.
Different media cares about different things. But if someone brings up something like that, you got to look at everything. You spend the time. I don't think that I don't want to be my whole horse because I make plenty of mistakes as a reporter and go with stories I shouldn't. But that's like 101. Somebody says,
think so.
obviously it's coming from someone with an agenda. Doesn't mean it's wrong. It's not the biggest accusation in the world. If you really want to write about it, spend some time. But I'm wondering about the school board.
Well, you know what I basically said, because evidently the president of the board was the one who said that perhaps there ought to be an attorney. Well, I think the president of the board, not the person, I don't think you can take seriously an unidentified complaint.
Yeah.
And that's what we tell people. If you want to make a complaint, then you have to own it. You've got to put your name on it.
Well, there are anonymous tip lines for government. And then I think what you do with that, I think there's a need for being able to put something anonymously. That doesn't mean it then becomes a public matter. You hire a lawyer. I think if it looks kind of serious, you want to believe some of the anonymous stuff that comes through. There was one person I'm not going to mention because it was another decade. There's one person in politics people were mad at. And if all the things we heard were true, this person had the most amazing sex life, being in 9 places at the same time, having sex with 9 different people. You don't then write an article and hire a lawyer. But in one place I would differ with you, though, Mayor Harp. So I do think people should be able to make anonymous tips, but you have to take them responsibly.
And you can look into them, but I don't know that you spend the taxpayers' money on them when there's another way. And so what I suggested to the superintendent is that if the president of the board believes that this matter is serious and wants it taken seriously, then he should make a complaint to and ask for an opinion of our ethics commission. And then if he's not satisfied with that, bring it back to the Board of Education and we can decide whether or not we want to hire an attorney.
I have to say that Bob does ask very interesting questions.
Can I put my 2 cents?
Yeah, let's hear your 2 cents, Bob.
Ed Joyner was also named in this story. And to me, Mayor, Ed Joyner, I think the board has wanted to get him off the board.
And if you notice the other board, and if you notice
that happened with Darnell at that meeting,
right? And if you notice, Bob, the other person targeted,
and he doesn't side with the mayor, Paul.
Right, and if you notice, the other person targeted had spoken up at a board committee meeting, criticizing what board leadership had done on another contract. Just days before that email went out. And you could read about that in the Independent because that was policy that was public. There was questions about a no-bid contract, which didn't have to be bid out. There are questions about whether it was necessary. And contracts, believe it or not, is the thing people get most concerned about because they want their people to get contracts or whatever. But there's starting to be more scrutiny. So some person spoke up. 2 days later, she shows up and her kids, an anonymous complaint, along with somebody else who's also been on the other side of the board leadership. And all of a sudden, the board wants to hire a lawyer.
Well, the board doesn't want to. The board hasn't taken this up. It's the board president who wants to. And I think there's a big difference. Look, at our last meeting, we were going to go into executive session on a related matter. And we got advice from an attorney who said that if you go into executive session on an individual's case, then that individual has to have the opportunity to say, one, whether he or she would want to be in or whether they want the matter to be public. And so we couldn't go into executive session because of FOI rules. And so now...
And is this dealing with the major issues of the schools?
This is dealing with a similar complaint.
So what I
that
think...
was unsigned.
What I might ask you for, using taxpayer money, is an artificial intelligence, real multimedia tool that could help us hour by hour keep track of who's on whose team and whose side on the Board of Ed when you fight about stuff. Because I was just listening to you. I'm thinking, wait a second, 2 days ago, that person was with that person and that person was against that person. It's wild.
Well, it's, honestly, I think that I think everybody on the Board of Education has a point of view that they adhere to and that we're not always on the same page. It just depends upon the issue, but that we always try to work together. And honestly, I'm sure it's no secret to most people that while I supported Dr. Joyner in his most recent win for Board of Education member, that we haven't always seen the same way. But in the last vote, that occurred at the Board of Education, we voted together. So, for me, I'm not always against you. It depends upon the policy matter. And I would think that with most of us, I would say with all of us, that it really depends upon the policy matter. And that sometimes we see things together, sometimes we see things differently, and different people see things the same way, and different people see things differently. And it really depends upon the issue. And I think people are really honestly true to the way in which they see things. There aren't real teams on the Board of Education.
I think Malcolm X said, "No permanent friends, no permanent enemies, just permanent interests."
Yeah, I mean, in a way, in many respects, it's very much that, and sometimes the interests change.
Bob, any other questions? That was a good one.
Yeah, I have one more school question, and that's about the protest today, Mayor, by the parents at John C. Daniels over the recent school budget cuts.
Yeah, and that was specifically
them
about
having
guidance counselors.
also the largest population from the hurricane, Maria, is it?
Oh, I know they have a large Spanish-speaking population.
So what's the question, Bob?
The question is, it is about the protest and about the cuts, Mayor. Do you see where they're coming from?
And Bob, thanks for the question. And why don't you hang up and listen to the answer on the phone? Thanks so much, pal.
Okay, I will.
Yes, my understanding in having a very brief discussion with the superintendent, John C. Daniels School is a magnet school. They get money from, I believe, the federal government. They get federal magnet money, and that there is money in the magnet grant to be used for that should the principal decide to do that. So this is really a principal call.
But weren't they also citywide? We've had to make tough budget choices.
Yes,
I mean,
we have.
the cuts we're making now are stuff that you would like to have in a perfect world, and something has to be cut. And the decision was made not just by you, that guidance counselors unfortunately needed to go before teachers did if we stick to a certain formula of how many you're supposed to have per kid. So isn't that's a real issue in the city, right?
No, it's a real issue, and we still are looking for savings of about $8 million. So there are going to be more cuts, and it's unfortunate. And we're used to having robust resources in the in New Haven Public Schools. It's just not that way anymore.
I was thinking about this guidance counselor thing because even with the number we had, they really aren't enough per kid to really have a lot of time for every kid. And we've always had a lack in the city for guidance counselors who help you get into the right college the way they do in the suburbs. I wondered if there's a way to team up. I'm sure they do some of this already with the New Haven Promise and the Community Foundation to get college-type people, professionals, or business people to volunteer at a school to give small groups of kids college advice. Like get many teams. You can't get with every kid, but let's say you had an after-school thing with you really want to help get into a college. Someone's volunteered the time in the community to spend a few weeks with you, walking through the process, help you think about what you want to do, help you look at your essay.
Well, I think that New Haven Promise already does some of that work for New Haven Public Schools. And the other thing that happened, John C. Daniels is a pre-K through 8 school. And what they did was actually move more of the guidance counselors that we have left into high school, where it really is important that kids have access to someone who can help them maneuver the whole college entrance experience.
Okay, so you're making priorities there.
Yes.
Triage.
Mm-hmm.
Can you also, back to the wordplay, LL Bean had an official opening. It's been around for a while. And you were hoping that New Haveners take the LL Bean like a duck boot to water.
Yeah.
Okay.
Have you seen that duck boot?
Yeah. I
the one that drives. I mean, the duck boot.
Oh, yeah, the big boot they bring around. Yeah. It's like a mascot.
Yeah. No, that's fun.
But Marquise Ricks and I couldn't remember what the third wordplay was, but we're having fun with Bubbles the elephant. So you had a groundbreaking of, Route 34, we're filling it in.
Yes.
It was a mini highway that never ended up finished getting built in the 60s when we tore down a whole neighborhood dividing the hill and West River. It's median strips of grass that gradually became surface parking lots. And the first big piece that you negotiated a deal to build in across from Career is a set of buildings, including, we're hoping one day, I guess, is that still a plan to get some kind of hotel there or something?
We hope so at some
But
point.
in the meantime, you got Continuum of Care as big headquarters there. You got a Rite Aid. And you just opened a preschool learning experience there.
Mm-hmm.
And you also got a plan for down at the other end
right.
Of what we're calling the Grassy Knoll. incline with grass is being filled in.
Right.
Where there's a peace park now, but it's kind of open space. There's gonna be a whole affordable housing development that LCI, your Liberal City Initiative Agency, is negotiating there for housing.
Right.
I always thought housing made the most sense there.
No, I think it does because I think there had been housing there previously before it was torn down, and I think that really connects.
Yeah, I'm thinking, how do you connect? Because it's hard to cross those streets
Right.
for kids. Like my wife was saying, what a great open space. But I was thinking it kind of became a parking lot anyway because you can't really go play there that easily if you're 6 or 12, dodging the. But if it's housing, it kind of becomes a neighborhood.
It does, and then you can actually open streets in there. And so the neighborhood shift, it actually started at Emmanuel Baptist Church, and Jerry Poole is involved with that. LCI is working with them. They wanted, this was...
Jerry Poole's the Forever West, and Joyce Poole, the Forever West River Hang In There activists in the neighborhood as it's gone through many transitions.
And so they set up this not-for-profit, they call it a shift group. People in the community and in New Haven have been putting money into this organization for many years so that they could then, they hoped, attract a developer and get the kind of support that they need. And they're getting the support from LCI to help them attract a developer who would partner with them. So it will be neighborhood based.
So this partner will do that. It's not.
Yes.
It'll be all affordable depending on if they get some grant money.
Right.
And they want a tax maybe. I was going to ask you a question as a follow-up that Aaron Good wrote in with.
Oh, okay.
So get ready for your Aaron Good question. Ready?
Hold on.
Pay attention. Know your facts. Okay. Aaron Good asked, and thank you for the question, Aaron. Could the mayor discuss her proposal for changing the tax assessment deferral program from development and how it would benefit the average resident and taxpayer? Let me give some background to that, and you'll see why I was going to ask this question. Thank you, Aaron. So the people who want to build this project want to also get a 17-year abatement on their taxes. It's all affordable housing and townhouses, 1 to 3 bedroom. And right now we have a program that, so does the state, that if you're building new stuff that's going to make a property worth a lot more, I think it's at least a 35% increase in its assessment, if I'm not wrong. Then we phase in the taxes, figuring that helps you build it, and it gets us more tax money, but it helps you afford to build it by not having to pay the big new tax bill right away.
Right away.
So right now so it's kind of interesting that this story came up at the same time as there was a Board of Alders hearing that Tom Breen covered the week before, where we're talking about changing the plan we have. Right now we have a plan where for 5 to 10 years, for 2 years, when you're building something new and making property worth a lot more, you don't pay any new taxes. And then it gets phased in for 5 years after that. And then you had a plan. People were raising questions about that with the Clock Square project on Hamilton Street, saying, well, development's changed now. Do we need to be offering that? Let's just get all the money up front. And your development administration has said, actually, especially when you want affordable housing, you do need that to make the finances work, and it does still build up the tax base. So that's two sides. But your team did come back with a plan, and that's what Aaron's referring to. They said, okay, let's change it, but let's still keep it incentive. Let's still give you the first 2 years, and let's let you phase it in over 7 more rather than 5 more, but let's get you paying more faster. So they say year 3, you'd pay 50% rather than 20% of the new value, then 10% each year down to 5% increments at the end. So that was a long way of saying, for this project and for the proposal administration, do you think it's working now? Or should it be changed?
Well, I think that a lot of people are seeing a lot of market level housing development go on, particularly around the downtown neighborhoods in a lot of the old parking lots that that came about, I think, through model cities. And we
model
have
parking lots.
And so a lot of these developers are not asking the city for much of anything except this tax situation.
And Matthew Nemerson, your Economic Development Administrator, brought up that point in the hearing. He said, this is the one disadvantage we still have. We have all these advantages, but our taxes are really high.
And so so the real question is, and for me, when we're looking at our revenue, we see all these buildings that we've built, and we're still not getting revenue for them. I would imagine that the average taxpayer is concerned about that as well. And so my development team feels that we still need to have some incentives, particularly for those who are building affordable housing. But any building that goes on the city is really helpful to the city. And so they came up with a proposal that starts to get us money a lot quicker, but still has value to the developer. And so that was what was presented to the Board of Alders. And they make a good, compelling point. The more building that is going on here, we receive the benefits from the building permits, from oftentimes access to those building jobs. Those are all really important things to happen. We know as well that we, particularly on affordable housing, that we could use more. I think that one of the things that Governor Malloy did was to understand that one of the reasons businesses are not locating here is that their workers can't afford to live here. So to the degree that this is housing that fulfills a niche, and even when it doesn't, the fact that it creates jobs is worthwhile to have something. But I would agree with the Alders who say that perhaps our initial subsidy was too great. And so,
or maybe it was geared to another time.
Right.
When it's hard to get people to build here.
Well, it's too great for today. And so I certainly support our team looking at how we get revenue quicker while not depressing the market.
You know, when I looked at it, I was thinking it's partly a leap of faith analysis. Well, I was thinking two things. One is this is that classic double pressure you got from the public, which is saying, I don't want to pay so much in taxes.
Right.
So you need to build a tax base. And often one way you build a tax base is let people build market rate housing on surface lots and then pay taxes. But then they say also we want affordable housing, which is real too. And sometimes it's not the same thing.
Right.
I'm wondering, so part of the gamble is, would they build, like I have to admit I'm kind of skeptical they would have built the Clock Square without some kind of phase-in, but I could be wrong about that. You're kind of guessing, right? It's kind of a poker game.
And
will this developer come if we don't give them that break?
And we have to look at our competitor cities. Even where we stand now, Hartford and other places, and granted Hartford maybe needs it more than we do, but they give a greater
do you
subsidy.
Want to live in Hartford?
They give a greater subsidy than we do, and some of the other cities are doing that as well. So if we want to be competitive among cities in Connecticut, we've got to do something. And I would agree with my economic development team around that.
And I would argue we also have to remind people that are listening to Mayor Monday, even though it's Thursday. Although it might also be Monday because we can play this again on Monday. And at WNHH FM 103.5 live streamed at NewHavenIndependent.org. I did want to ask you about, one more. So we talked the other day about Live, Work, Learn, Play. There's a big parking lot downtown that used to have the New Haven Coliseum. When you came in, there was a deal handed to you saying these guys from Montreal are going to build a project that everybody in New Haven loved. It was what everybody dreamed of, and then they couldn't get the money to build it. So now you gave them, they said 45 days, we're going to have your answer if we're still in after all these years, and we're going to build it. And then you didn't hear from them about whether they still can get financing for it, get either a partner or someone to buy them out. So what's next?
So I've asked Economic Development Administrator Matthew Nemerson to contact them to see where they are. And and I think they've been very honest with us when they've had difficulty. And if it appears that they're still having difficulty getting financing, then we're going to ask them to either reconfigure the project and get other kinds of partners that might be better able to get the financing, or we're going to ask them to relinquish the relationship.
And are they basically holding to see if they can get a good price since there's other building going around, but then also whether they can sue you to get some money if you take the first move and say they can't do it?
Yeah,
it seems like another poker game to me.
It is kind of a poker game. I think that they want us to buy them out, but and because they have invested some money into design and other kinds of work for the project, but
can't they just make that money selling it themselves?
I don't know if they have the right to sell it themselves. I don't know.
Can't you just give them the right, or do you want to have more say over who buys it?
I think we want to have say. We want to really do. We want this to be our project this time. It's one that we inherited.
So I got to say that I always had a take on this, a bias alert. I'd heard from other people who wanted to build there that the problem with that proposal from the beginning was that they said everything everybody wanted to hear. It's going to have open space. It's going to have this great mix of retail business, which we all loved. Everything that they knew that people might argue about, but that the market didn't support it. And the reason other people wanted to build there weren't going to build it quite that much of a mix was they felt they wouldn't get financing. I remember hearing that at the time from someone who didn't get it.
Yeah.
I think that's what happened. I wonder if letting the market dictate, like for instance, the market was going to support more hotels, and now you have 4 or 5 hotel projects going. Maybe it doesn't need to have a hotel anymore.
Well, I think that it does, and I'll tell you why. Because even though we have 4 or 5 hotels, they're tiny hotels. You can't have big meetings there. You're limited still to having your biggest meeting at Omni, and while that is nice, it's really not as big as we need to get if we're going to attract more of that
Or
type of
conversely,
business.
can we make it more of a hotel project? Make more of it the hotel and
Right.
not try to cram so much else in?
That's another thought.
It's just amazing to me how much housing is being built right over the train tracks there on Union Street, right around the corner on State and Chapel, 2 blocks over on Crown, 4 or 5 different projects, Crown and College. And that's great. And so much is going to go on. You have the great Cafe 9 and the Scapo right on that block and Firehouse 12. That parking lot's just waiting to be something.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I think I agree with you. I think that at some point we've got to worry about being overbuilt in market level apartments.
All right. And so I wanted to ask you about the police department. We had a story, not a happy story last week, that 4 separate cops in unrelated incidents within 3 months were arrested for domestic violence. Now, any big organization has people who get arrested from time to time. This was kind of an unusual spike at a time when the department's making a focus on dealing with domestic violence in the community. Any thoughts about that?
Well, one of the things I did have a discussion with the police chief, and one of the things that we discussed is whether or not when we do our training and we talk about de-escalation and those other skills that police officers have to have, that we also include domestic violence, not for when they visit a home and are having to deal with it, but for when they have to deal with it in their personal lives.
In one case, there was a guy who strangled, admitted to it, strangling his wife. The other case was the guy's admitted, but he had the big SWAT standoff briefly before he came out. The guy for a week was keeping his kid hostage, a high-ranking cop.
Yeah.
How did they miss the signs on that, do you think? Or does that happen everywhere?
Well, I think that, honestly, I knew this gentleman. He was the most mild-mannered man that I've met, probably on the police force. Really a very congenial, mild-mannered person. I was shocked when I heard that. And I think a lot of his people that knew him, that worked with him, were also very surprised that this was going on in his life.
Dangerously treading into pop psychology here. So he did have to shoot someone dead, and he had some PTSD, and he was on Xanax. So I guess that he didn't maybe take advantage of the employee assistance program, which the cops are always trying to get people to do. EAP.
Well, and I think that's really hard. That's why I think it really ought to be built into their ongoing training. And we do a lot of training with our police officers, and we've also got to train them how to deal with their own emotional and issues, and to get rid of the stigma that is attached to that. Right now, going to EAP, there's a stigma attached to it, unfortunately. They all know it's available to them, so that we've got to find ways to get them to understand that self-help is the most important help that you can give others. And if you're going to serve people, you've got to serve yourself first.
Is there a macho element in a military organization? You're tough. You don't need to talk it out some wimpy way.
I think there may be some
Just
of
deal with
that,
it.
and that honestly, I think that one of the signs of emotional and mental distress is that you don't recognize that you have emotional and mental distress, and I think that that's part of it. And so helping people to understand the signs and that they may have personally, and then encouraging them to get help. And yes, if there are friends of them, their classmates who suspect this is going on, to reach out, to find ways to reach out to them and get them support to go get the help that they need.
Okay, and you got some new help at your Chief Administrative Officer coming soon, Sean Madison.
Yes.
Familiar face from City Hall. He was Chief of Staff for 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
He tapped into replace Mike Carter, who's retired, as someone in head of our line departments. Chief Administrative Officer really oversees a lot of the people you see face-to-face in government: police department, fire department, public works, emergency management. How'd you find this guy?
Well, I certainly had known him. He was chief of staff when I was in the General Assembly, and from time to time, he worked for CONCAN.
That's the Charter Advocacy Group.
Right, and I knew that he had an interest in New Haven, and I've got to say that a number of people called me up and said, "Have you considered him?" And I thought, well, he would be.
So you reached out to him, not vice versa?
Yeah, I reached out to him because a couple of maybe 3 or 4 people asked me to give it some thought, and so I reached out to him, and as I thought about it, I thought he would be a good choice because he had been in the city as the chief of staff for 7 years, and that he could hit the ground running.
I just love the guy's manner. He's kind of funny. He's always got kind of a dour expression, like very deadpan. Like he's watching everything that goes on. He understands how the city works. He knows who wants what, and he always kind of hangs back. He doesn't make himself the story, but like he's always really watching crazy stuff going on, but just kind of taking it in and has this kind of matter of fact approach. He's an interesting guy.
So we're hopeful. I think he'll be able to hit the ground running. We're doing some really interesting things with our collaboration among our departments, and I think that he'll be able to foster.
And you're talking
that.
partly, I think, about those sweeps that you're not supposed to. We're not supposed to call sweeps, right? But the word kind of stays with us. You go into neighborhoods, all the inspectors from different departments together, trying to see how quality of life issues like slumlords, broken street lights, code violations can be cleaned up all in one big batch and get people used to calling those in.
Right.
It's been kind of interesting.
Yeah, it is.
I kind of dig that. And then there was another guy who's been moving in and out of New Haven government, Eric Johnson. When you came in, he was the head of Liberal City Initiative. He's kind of rising star, grew up here, knew a lot about development.
Yeah.
He made some mistake right got here that he really fixed up great, which was Wright Gardens, the co-ops. He picked the wrong guy. Neighbors were upset that he really picked a good person and worked with them and got him in. So then, despite your best efforts, you lost him to California. He got some job out there. Then he came back because he missed New Haven. He worked at the Housing Authority in their development arm. And now Hartford snagged him to be their head of development. Think he'll come back one day again?
Oh, I'm sure he might come back at
Maybe
some
he's
point.
development administrator.
Perhaps, but he'll get a great opportunity in Hartford. There's a lot of work to do up there.
But let's face it, nobody stays in Hartford very long. You want to have a life. Okay, that's my editorial comment there. No, that's not yours. Cornell Scott Hill Health Center is celebrating 50 years Saturday night at the Omni. It started as this wave of new community health centers 50 years ago, like Fairhaven's all over the country. They've been a pretty durable model. You worked there, you saw it firsthand. You legislated about community health center. What's your thought of Cornell Scott at 50 and the role they're playing and how it's evolved, if at all?
Well, one of the things that Cornell Scott himself believed in.
And he was the founder.
He was the founder and came here to go to Yale School of Public Health and saw a dire need in the Hill neighborhood and worked with the advocates there to build the healthcare center. But he wanted the Hill Health Center to be a one-stop shop. And so I think it's very close to being a one-stop shop. You can walk in there, you can get dental care, you can get, if you can get internal medicine, you can get pediatrics, you can get OBGYN, you can get some specialty care, you can get behavioral health care, and they run a detox facility down the street on Cedar Street.
And they're in Dixwell, too?
They're in Dixwell. They're also in the West Rock neighborhood, and I believe they're out in the valley. So they're really in multiple places, and so they do all of what I consider to be healthcare. When I was in the General Assembly, they thought that we would have a Medicaid program that would be able to collapse physical health with behavioral health and dental health, and the state has been struggling to do that for all these years, but Cornell Scott Hill Health Center has been able to do that.
What's interesting to me is how we argue about so much in this country, including about what role government should play, and I don't know if it still is today, but until recently, it was a real bipartisan consensus in government to fund community health centers. I felt like George W. Bush, I think one of the great accomplishments of his administration that got very little notice was what a believer he was in community health centers and how the funding increased. And now these two centers are finding ways, not just with government, to be economically sustainable and evolve, including the new center, I think still going forward down on Long Wharf. They're planning with Yale New Haven.
Right.
So did you find that legislation here, and is it still true that Republicans and Democrats agree on this?
I think so. And one of the things that people who may not believe in the Affordable Care Act and other kinds of things. They believe that people should have access to health care, behavioral health care, and dental care. And the best model to do that, aside from the insurance model, is with federally qualified health care centers like Cornell Scott and Fairhaven.
And you're getting an award.
Yes, I'm
Lifetime
excited
achievement.
about that. Yes, it's wonderful. I worked there for 27 years. So.
Working on homeless issues.
Right, yeah.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Hope you have a good time.
I hope so too. Thank you so much.
I hope everybody's dressed right for it. I think they will be. I bet it's one of those ones I would never show my face for that reason. Thanks for joining us today on Mayor Monday on Thursday on WNHH Radio, broadcast at 103.5 FM. Thanks to Gateway Community College, Bertram Moses, BC, for providing financial support. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. We know what it's like to be free. We just got to remember to book our flight. Fly free with us all day and all night long here at WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio.